Hello and welcome to the MB Om podcast, where you will learn to master the business of yoga with guests from around the world who have experienced becoming successful yoga teachers, studio owners, and much more. Now, here's your host, Amanda Kingsmith.
Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of the podcast. I hope that everyone had a fabulous Christmas or holiday season, whatever you celebrate, with people that you love in your life. I'm really excited for today's episode because I have a returning guest from season 1. And that returning guest is Tara Koenig. Tara was on the podcast for episode 7 in season 1, and she came on to talk about her passion and her experience with the Africa Yoga Project. And at the point that we talked, she was raising money to go to Kenya with Baptiste Yoga to do training and to help out with the programs over there. And since then, she's returned. She's had a ton of experiences, and it was fun because when we talked, I was back in Banff and I was able to join her in her kitchen with a cup of tea to talk about saturated yoga markets. So for anyone who may be fresh out of teacher training, returning to a saturated market, or already works in a saturated market, Tara's here to talk about a few of her tips for kind of standing out in that market as a newer yoga teacher. So without further ado, here's Tara. All right, I've got Tara Koenig back on the podcast for season 2, which is super exciting. And I've got her here in front of me today. So welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
And we're sitting in Tara's kitchen in Banff, Alberta, drinking tea. And it seems only appropriate that we're sitting here talking about saturated yoga markets. And it's really relevant because we live in a community where our market is super saturated.
Yeah, it's kind of a blessing and a curse in that it's a very like-minded community, a very mindful community. And being said for so I'd say the population of Banff sits at around 9,000. There's probably about 500 other yoga instructors in town, which with such a small population, only a few places where there's regular classes, like studio style classes. There's only so many classes that a certain teacher can get. And kind of becoming a popularity contest, whereas if your numbers go down or if attendance really dwindles, then you're kind of taken off the schedule.
Yeah, totally. And it's interesting too because what is Canmore's population, 15,000?
Something like that.
And there's probably another 500 yoga teachers there.
Yeah.
And 2 yoga studios. And so just for context, it's we live in this valley with 2 sort of sistering neighboring towns, with, I guess, a combined 25,000 people who are local, approximately, and 3 main yoga studios, I would say. So that gives opportunity for, 15 teachers maybe? Yeah,
I'd say about that.
And then there's kind of other things like working for gyms or that sort of thing. So there's a few other opportunities, but it is really hard to get a job. And I know it's something that I've talked about time and time again, where it's I got my teacher training, was yeah, I want to teach. How do I do this thing? Mm-hmm. And you kind of became a teacher and started teaching here, right?
Yeah, so I did my teacher training with Power Yoga Canada in Ontario, let's say August 3 years ago, and then came out to Banff that September. And showed up and I was I'm going to be a yoga teacher. And showed up here and was what's available? Because in Oakville, yoga is really growing and there's maybe about 10 studios there now. So there's lots of opportunity that I was seeing. And ignorant me thought that would transfer over to Banff. There was a few opportunities that happened to open up, Camera Hot Yoga. I got a audition class the second day I was here, which was awesome.
Yeah.
And then the Banff Life class, which became my staple and my favorite class every week, opened up as well. And then everything else, it seems like I've been fighting for or struggling for to get numbers up, to maintain, and to really increase my class numbers each week.
Yeah, definitely. And I've found the same thing. I mean, it was really interesting going down to Atlanta and being I'm going to look up yoga studios and find somewhere to teach, and being oh, there's hundreds of yoga studios in this massive city. And it was actually more difficult to narrow down on the type of yoga studio that was actually going to suit my teaching style than it was to find
to find a studio in general. And then it was like a process of going and meeting people and then auditioning and getting hired. But it seemed like it was so different, but in like an easier way, I guess, if that makes sense. Like there's just way more opportunities. So being a new teacher wasn't as like, oh, you've only been teaching for a year. Like, that's too bad. Did you find that it was hard as a newer teacher to sort of get those regular gigs?
Yeah, for sure. It wasn't until I'd say like 1 year living in Banff that I actually got a regular class. I was subbing whenever I could, and I definitely put my name out there that I wanted to sub. And I was definitely throwing out the idea of teaching karma or by donation community classes, because I know that's how a lot of people get started. That's how you get your teaching style across. That's how you get your practice hours, which practice hours especially are super important for new teachers.
Yeah.
It took, I'd say, about a year for like a paid regular studio class.
Yeah. Which is
like one class.
So crazy, because in a city, I mean, like if you do your teacher training with a certain studio, like you're almost like kind of fed right into that studio scene. Yeah.
And so a lot of bigger cities now have like chains of studios. So I think there's like about 10 Power Yoga Canadas in Ontario.
Wow.
So in order to teach there, you either are doing Baptiste or Power Yoga Canada's training, and then that is your door into teaching for those studios. And I know a lot of studios want you to take their own training so that people who are teaching what they want to be taught.
Yeah.
Whereas here it's a little bit different. We've got from like Yoga Nidra to Baptiste Power Yoga to Hatha to Ashtanga to what have you.
Jeff Ma Yin.
Yeah. Randomly stepping on someone yoga. Which is great because people, especially if you're new to the yoga practice, you can come out and try a few classes in Banff or Canmore and get like completely different experiences from completely different teaching styles and teacher like how they've been trained, which is awesome because you kind of like dip your toes and figure out which postures, which sequence, what kind of teaching style fits for you. And that's also a little bit of a hindrance on teachers because someone might come and try your class for 3 weeks and it's like, oh, but then I found this other thing and I want to try that out.
Yeah.
So it's like hopping around a lot.
Yeah, definitely. It's kind of interesting because I remember I did my like restorative teacher training up in Asheville, North Carolina, which is kind of like a bigger version of the Bow Valley here. It's like everyone and their dog is a yoga teacher. There's a lot of really cool yoga studios. There's like kombucha on tap everywhere, like vegetarian food. Like it's just very like yogic culture. And I remember in the training, there was a couple of people who were talking about how there was like no yoga in the communities that they were from, sort of like surrounding the area in the southern US. And I was like, oh, that kind of sucks. And they're like, it's like a huge opportunity though. And you're like the only yoga teacher to start a program. And I was like, oh yeah, like that would be. And it's interesting thinking about a community like that where there's no yoga. And as a teacher, you have all this potential to create yoga versus being in a community where it's still small, but there's a ton of yoga and it makes it a lot more difficult to create your own opportunities.
Yeah. Yeah, like I said before, it's both a blessing and a curse in both ways.
Yeah. You get like people who are like-minded, who like kind of think more like you do, who maybe have more of that like kombucha tea drinking, Malavi lifestyle. But then it also makes it way harder to actually be a yoga teacher.
Yeah. And I found for sure, like we definitely have more popular teachers in town and people like to show up for what they like. And if you're not that person, then it's like, why bother?
Yeah, no. I mean, using like Jeff Ma as an example, I remember one of the studio managers he was running late, new baby. One of the studio managers of the studio was behind the counter kind of getting people checked in because everything was just like running really slow. And a woman walked in and goes, is she teaching? Like, I'm leaving if she's teaching. She's like, it's okay, he's coming. Which is another really interesting thing, which makes it kind of difficult to be a sub. Like, it's almost like substitute teacher style in like high school.
Oh, it's terrifying. I remember the first time I subbed for Erin here, who in context is like the Keno McGregor of Banff. And first of all, people did that. They walked in and be like, oh, where's Erin? And weren't aware that she was away, and like, be like, okay, cool, see ya. I'll come back when Erin's teaching, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then it's not only the pressure, it's more so the pressure that you put on yourself, especially as a new teacher. And then that, like shadow playing in your head, like what would Erin start off the class with? What would she say here? How would she make the move? Am I pushing them too hard? But then Erin classes are really hard, and it's like, holy fuck, what's going on here? And it gets very stressful. But again, I think most of that, as I became more comfortable teaching, then I would just dismiss those thoughts. And like the people who only showed up for Erin, I was like, cool, well then clearly you need more yoga if you're so fixated on a certain teacher, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. It's kind of interesting to hear you say that, because when I talked to Erin for the podcast, she was like, one of her biggest pieces of advice for new yoga teachers was to always be yourself. So always to like let your authentic self come through. She's like, we don't need another Jeff Ma or another Erin Evans. We need like another you.
Yeah.
Or we need a you, not another you. So definitely interesting.
Yeah, and then I think especially in a super saturated market, it's about finding your niche. So the thing that you're really passionate about, and the thing quite often your passions you're very good at as well. For me, it's like acrobatic stuff, so acro yoga. And then I'm such a water baby, and there was no SUP yoga in the Valley. So I contacted Brandon from Bow Valley SUP being like, let's do this. Why not?
Yeah.
Everything that's on your mat can be translated onto a board.
Totally.
Within reason. And let's try something new in the Valley. And I think that's where new teachers really need to start to expand. So rather than filling a very popular teacher's shoes and doing exactly like they're doing, try and step away and see like, I love this, and this. What can I create from that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. I think that that's a good thing to remember, because it's easy to get really fixated on like, this teacher is really popular, people really like them, that means I should be like them if people are going to like me. But it's more like, how can I bring something different to this table where there's already a lot of players?
Yeah. And sometimes it's hard being so different. Like, I know, obviously, I'm very loud. I don't want to use the word aggressive, but I demand a lot of my students. And I know for people who are used to being in yin classes where they're coddled and stroke your hair, that can be very abrupt to them to be in a class. So there's a lot of resistance. And with a lot of resistance come a lot of bad feedback. Yeah,
definitely. I would love to talk about sort of your experience of working at a studio, getting bad feedback, getting let go from that studio, and how you've sort of like transitioned from there.
Well, yeah, so it wasn't the best of experiences, but obviously it helped me grow as a teacher. I had gotten three verbal bad feedbacks from different students over the course of, let's say, 2 years. And so I was let go from a studio. And like, putting aside who sent the feedback, what was said in the feedback, either way, it wasn't great.
Yeah.
And so the first couple of weeks after that was such a blow, because I had identified as like, I am a teacher at the studio. And like, when I introduced myself to someone or they asked what I did, that would be like the first thing that comes to mind. And so like, having that identity stripped away was a huge blow. I lost a lot of self-esteem. I lost a lot of confidence. I lost a lot of my community, I felt. And then I went away to Kenya, where I rediscovered that a yoga practice doesn't necessarily need to take place in a studio.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be a perfect place. You can practice yoga on a dirt floor without a yoga mat, by yourself in the middle of a slum, and still have an amazing practice.
Yeah.
And so it kind of was perfect timing, me going to Kenya and experiencing that, and then coming back to the Bow Valley and be like, it's okay. I'm going to get through this. just because I was fired from a place doesn't mean that I'm no longer a yoga instructor. And so I just had to rebuild myself up. I had to rebuild my own practice. And that's where self-practice came in. I had to rebuild confidence. And I had to keep reaching out and asking for those opportunities. Like, if people were going away, say, cool, can I sub for you? Or with another studio in town, ask for more chances, more time slots to get yoga going at other places.
Yeah.
Other than this one studio.
Yeah, I guess it makes it like, you know, I guess kind of like we were talking about before, like it's even getting more creative and thinking about like outside of the box, like outside of the studio, like how can I be a yoga teacher still? And I think that like it's obviously really, really tough when you're like, this is like my place. Like,
yeah, it definitely made me get really creative. It made me, and just push myself out of the comfort zone, because it was so easy to have a studio job and then fill in at that studio or cover at that studio. So I wasn't really being pushed outside of my comfort zone, which in a yoga practice, you know that you grow when you're outside of your comfort zone.
Yeah, I mean, in life in general, it's like as soon as you kind of step out of that, like, that box of safety, you're like, okay, like, I'm growing as a person now.
Yeah.
It's totally the same as a teacher and as a practitioner.
And I know, like, from just sharing my experience with people from larger cities, like, people get fired from studios all the time. I just happened to be the first teacher fired from this particular studio.
Yeah.
So took one for the team there.
And it's always hard too when you're like in a smaller town, like when you're in a small place, like news travels like wildfire.
Oh my goodness. It was like within days, people calling, asking, what happened? Are you okay? And then like just that chain of telephone where information gets misinterpreted. And being like, why did you do this? Kind of thing. Like, oh my God.
You're like, that's not what happened.
Yeah. So like kind of sounding like a broken record, saying like telling the same story over and over, like the events that happened up to getting fired kind of thing. And it also made me really realize, although this is like the business of yoga.
Yeah.
It really made me step away from the business side of yoga, which I feel is very un-yogic.
Yeah.
Like the revenue, the numbers, the popularity, the attachment to all those things, and stepping away and being like, cool, I'm a yoga teacher because why? I want to be of service. I want to help empower people. Yoga helped me overcome so many things, and I want to translate that to my students. And it's the business side of yoga, so studio owner, managing your own business as a teacher, and then being and living as a yoga teacher, to me, are two completely different things.
Yeah.
And that event really helped me, like, oh my God, it's not the same thing.
Yeah. No, that's really cool to hear, because I think that it is very different. And it's one of these things too, I've talked to other people about, where I think sometimes people like, they get their teacher training and they think like, oh, I should be a teacher. And then they're like not really feeling it. It's not really their thing, but they're like, no, I did this. I should do it. I should do it. And that comes again to like, you can be, there's like your practice and you as like a yogi, I guess, if that's who you identify. And then there's like your business of yoga, if that's what you choose to do.
Yeah.
And it is like two different things.
It would be like opening up a nail salon or something. Like, how would you create enough income to live off of that? And like, what kind of practices would you do to sustain your business? And that's exactly what it is. Like owning a studio, whatever it looks like, is a business in itself. And a lot of business practices, again, like I said, are not yogic in my mind.
Yeah.
With the way you go about them.
Yeah, and I think that's also why like the business side of yoga is often sort of like maybe not talked about or not thought about or like not as clear. Like it's part of the reason why I was like, I want to start this podcast, because I think it can be like a little bit easier than people think it is. Like they're like, business, like it's like a bad word. And if you want to like make it a profession, you kind of do have to think about like all those things that go into actually, you know, putting food on your table and roof over your head and that sort of thing.
Yeah, it stretches way beyond just getting a studio class and like having those, say you've got 5 classes a week, those 5 hours that you're teaching. I'd say there's maybe another 5 hours of work put into that. Social media, like say where you're teaching and when, or talking to people about why they should be doing yoga and invite them to your classes. Just promoting yourself. Self-promotion, I think, I know is such a huge aspect, especially for new teachers. Word of mouth is probably the best way to get people to your classes.
Yeah, definitely. I think that if somebody can hear about what you're doing, or hear that you're teaching, or hear about a free event that you're a part of, and then they can experience what you're doing, and they like what you're doing, then they're probably going to come back, which is super cool. Yeah. Talking about sort of like the financial side, that's kind of an interesting thing about living somewhere like here, where you come into this market and you maybe don't have that much experience, or nobody like knows your teaching style. And then you start picking up sort of more of these karma classes. I mean, you're really not making enough money to survive there.
No. So typically karma classes or community classes, you're just volunteering your time. And again, that's a way to, one, give back to your community, but also really build up your confidence. If public speaking is an issue for you, then take on a couple community classes and it's like a way to practice.
Totally.
Practice your teaching. I've actually been scrutinized and lost some opportunities because I do so much karma yoga. But that again comes back into, I'm a yoga teacher to be of service. And I've got another job, or like 5 other jobs on the side to help pay the rent and buy my milk and eggs and stuff like that. So I'm okay with doing that. And I know other teachers definitely are suggesting to their new students to never do a class for free because it devalues you. So I'm on the opposite side of that spectrum. If I think you can give back, then give back. Like whether it's your time, your energy, your money.
Yeah, I think that, like, I mean, I've heard advice going both ways from various different people I've talked to. And I think that, like, having come out of teacher training in the last year and a half, like, I think that there is value for going in and being like, yeah, like, I just want to teach, like, I want to find my voice and stuff. Do you think there's a point where, like, in your career, you need to start saying no to those, like, free sort of opportunities?
In my mind, no.
No?
Because...
Or maybe you haven't hit it yet.
Definitely not. I still consider myself a new teacher. I'm still learning about my voice, my style, my niche, let's call it, every single time I teach something.
Yeah.
And for me, if I can inspire someone who happens to show up to a free yoga class that I'm teaching to continue on with their yoga journey, then I never feel like it was a waste of my time or energy.
Yeah. No, that's a really good way to look at it, because I think that it's easy to put like a numerical face value on the time that you're putting in, which, I mean, if that's like what you're trying to do as your profession, I think that there's definitely like value to thinking about it like that. But you also have to kind of keep in mind that there's things that are of value that are not just monetary. So I was talking to somebody in a different episode who was saying, like, he kind of got discovered, like, doing free festivals, free events. He's like, yeah, I just taught wherever I could. And he's like, it didn't matter to me if I got paid or not, because it was this opportunity to be like, yo, studio owner, like, I'm a teacher, like, come check me out.
And it's one of those things when you're so passionate about something, it doesn't matter whether you're making money off of it or not. Like, so long as you're like living your passion, then I never feel like it's a waste of time or that I should be reimbursed for it. Yes, it's nice to get money, especially when, I don't even want to know how much money I've invested in yoga trainings at this point. Buy a new house.
It's like an investment in yourself though, right?
Yeah, definitely. So I'm okay with not making a lot.
Yeah.
Off of my yoga teaching. I know there is, I'd say like the 1% of yoga teachers that definitely do make a really good living. Again, that's popularity. That's their marketing. That's how they've marketed themselves. Yeah, but for me right now, I'm pretty content with a couple classes a week, volunteering my time, and then the few studio classes that I do have.
Yeah. Do you think that you look at your teaching differently because it's not about the money that you're getting out of it?
Yeah, so I started volunteering my time with the YWCA, teaching a yoga class there. And it's more so trauma specific. The Y here does a lot of work with women, or anyone, I should say, who's been through sexual abuse or what's the word I'm looking for?
Domestic abuse?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And it really is an opportunity for me to share my experiences and help people. It's my way of like, this worked for me. I'm hoping that it works for you. Here are the tools that I learned. Take them and do with it what you please.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. I think that it's really cool to see the thing that's like so powerful for you and be able to translate that for somebody else.
Yeah.
And be like, you know, take it as you will and run with it.
Yeah. And then like bringing that back to a oversaturated market, again, that's finding the niche. So it's a very unfortunate stat, but there's a lot of sexual and domestic abuse that happens in the Bow Valley. So if I'm able to provide, let's call it a service to people who are victims or suffering from it,
Yeah.
and they feel like they can't go to a studio or another class or reach out in another way, then yeah, that's another niche market there. And it's not necessarily a market to make money, but a market to share yoga.
Yeah.
Which I feel as yoga instructors, that's our goal.
Yeah. To have more people doing yoga.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting, like sort of this duality between like yoga on and off the mat and being a yoga teacher, and then being a yoga teacher and like supporting yourself. Because I think anytime there's money tied to it, it is looked at a little bit differently. And I think there's pros and cons to both for sure. And I think that if you're going to try and like make it as a yoga teacher, do it full time, you definitely have to be watching how much money you're making. But I love like what you're talking about with the different way that it kind of sits with you by being like, yeah, this is my time and I'm happy to give it to you because, you know, this changed my life. Like I want it to change your life too.
Yeah. I also feel like I should backtrack. So when I first got to town, I had another full-time job. And then this was when I was like really striving to pick up yoga classes because I identified so much with being a yoga instructor. And then I quit that job because I was miserable. I was like, how am I living yoga if I'm stuck in this job that I hate going to every day? So I quit that and I was like, I'm going to make it as a yoga instructor.
Yeah.
And I found that I was like fighting tooth and nails to get those classes, and every single opportunity that came up, I put a dollar amount to it.
Yeah.
Be like, sweet, I'll sub 1, 2, and 3 classes that week. That's another $150. Sweet, I can pay this bill. I can do this.
Yeah.
And that got exhausting.
Yeah.
Like constantly counting classes, how much I would make, especially when classes are paid on a sliding scale based on how many people show up.
Yeah.
So it's a bit of a gamble. It's like, is my 3 hours worth this $35, like including driving and all of this stuff, set up and tear down. And then, so having another job that I love, I should say, as my primary income. And then this is like, how else can I say it? Like hobby money.
Yeah.
Like passion money.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. When it comes in, it comes in.
Yeah.
But I'm not dependent on it.
Yeah. It's not like you're like, okay, chop chop, get to class. I can't eat lunch after this if you don't show up. It's kind of interesting because one of the first pieces of advice I ever received, this is like when I booked my teacher training, but I hadn't even become a yoga teacher. Somebody was like, make sure you always keep something else on the side so that you don't burn out. And I was like, okay, cool. Like, I don't know why you're telling me this right now. Like, I'm not even teaching. Like, I don't even know if I'm going to teach. And it's something that's kind of stuck with me as I've sort of explored like what I want to do with my teaching. And it's like, okay, yeah, I think that having something else on the side is always going to be valuable. So I'm not like running myself into the ground, like thinking about, oh, I need another person in this class that I can make X dollars so that I can buy this thing and go on this trip. And I don't know, there's a certain like resentment that sort of comes there. And I feel like that comes across when you teach, if you're being resentful towards your students.
numbers thing comes into like you devalue yourself because you're devalued monetary. Is that the right word?
Yeah.
Money.
Yeah.
So you're like, oh, only 3 people showed up, therefore I'm only making this amount of money, therefore I'm not a great teacher. Because had this many people shown up and had I been more popular, had a bigger following, I would have gotten this amount of money and then I would have felt better about myself.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's kind of interesting to think about that. It's like a weird like game that your mind sort of plays on you.
Oh, and that's where like living yoga off your mat, especially as a teacher, really comes into play. Like I still get caught up in the game of comparison. And as we all know, comparison is the thief of joy.
Yeah.
And it's so, so true, especially as a teacher. It's like, cool, I'm not Erin Evans, and why am I even trying?
I hope she listens to this. She's gonna be like, you guys are ridiculous.
But it's so true, and that was my thinking for so long, and I still sometimes get caught up in that. Like, I had a friend who lives out of town, and I know that he'll drive in for an Erin Evans class, yet when it comes time for my class, it's easy to pass it by.
Yeah.
And I'm like, sweet. This sucks. What are you getting from her that you're not getting from me?
Yeah.
And then how can I do that? And how can I be better?
Yeah.
Is that line of like wanting to better yourself for the sake of bettering yourself without being like, if I was better, I would make more money. If I was better, I would have more of a following.
Yeah.
If I was better, my classes would be packed and people would be asking for me every single day of the week.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting to think about that, like, because I think that it is important to grow and improve and like strive for things as a teacher and a practitioner. But it's like, why are you trying to be better? Like, what's your motivation? Is it because you want to like pack out a room and be like some other yoga teacher that you really idolize? Or is it for some other reason that's really personal?
Yeah. Yeah, that question, why, comes up so much. It's like, why, even like if you're wanting to sign up for a teacher training, why? Mm-hmm. And your why could change. Like, you could be like, oh, yoga teaching seems awesome, I'm going to sign up for it. Or it could be to better your practice.
Yeah.
It could be to learn alignment, or simply like, this is how you're investing your vacation time this year.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. And then constantly coming back to the why, which sometimes even myself, I lose track of.
Mm-hmm. It kind of can become like such a big part of your life that it's just like, this is what I do. Like, it's just like part of your everyday. It's like part of your identity. It's part of like you. Mm-hmm. And then it is still important to look at like why you're still doing it, why you still want to do it. There was a woman in that restorative teacher training that I was talking about, and she came. She wasn't a teacher. She's just like a woman who's got a lot of stress in her life, and she's looking to like learn to relax. Mm-hmm. So she came to like restorative teacher training. I was like, that is so cool that you invested this time and this money just for yourself, just to do that. Yeah, and you make such amazing connections at these places, whether it be a retreat or a teacher training. Some of my best friends in the world are all over the world that I've met at these trainings, because you are so open, so vulnerable. You're pushed, well, at least in like the power yoga, you're pushed to your physical limits to start to break down your mental limits. Yeah. And really, like, it's 7 days long and you're a completely different person from day 1 to day 7. And you've got these people who are not only supporting you along the way, but also going through the same crap that you're going through. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting when you spend like, I don't know, I guess it's like not technically 24 hours a day, but it's basically like 24 hours a day for like X amount of days with people. You just build a bond that's so different from other bonds that you have with people. Mm-hmm. It's like, oh yeah, we like learned the skeleton together. Like, I know. Yeah. Which is kind of funny. But yoga just in general sort of does that, which is really cool. Mm-hmm. And then coming sort of like back around to like teaching in a saturated market. So we talked about like finding a niche, finding something that you really like. Do you find for you it was kind of like trial and error? It's like, okay, I'll try this. Oh, definitely. My trial as an Ashtanga teacher did not go so well. And then, so
power yoga, definitely, I love the dynamic practice, and that's what my body likes to practice. And I think that shows in my teaching.
Yeah.
And same acro yoga, like put me upside down and I'm super happy.
Yeah.
And then that shows in my teaching. I'm a happy teacher.
Yeah.
I've taught a few yin classes, and as someone who, let's say, like borderline ADD and like wants to do 10,000 chaturangas in a class, I'm sitting there like pacing, trying to teach a yin class. So obviously that wasn't my niche or my passion. Whereas where there's yin teachers, let's take Erin Chaba. She just found that and rolled with it and is one of the best yin teachers, in my opinion, that I've ever had.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting how, like, some people just have this capability of, like, holding space for people to just be, like, silent.
Yeah, and when I was new, I thought that, or I felt that I had to be good at everything. And that's, like, in your own yoga practice, let's say, you're not going to be good at everything.
Yeah.
So why would you have to be a great restorative yin, nidra, meditation, power, sup, and acro teacher all at the same time?
Yeah.
It was exhausting.
Yeah.
It was,
It's like trying to wear all these different hats, and it's like a bunch of them don't fit quite right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, that's an interesting learning experience, because I don't think that's uncommon. I think that a lot of people are like, okay, I need to be like a well-rounded yoga teacher who's like good at everything. And like, I think that it's really great to try different things to find out what you like.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, not everyone's going to be good with kids. Not everyone's going to want to do prenatal. Not everyone's going to want to do, like, sit there and breathe for an hour. Mm-hmm. So it's like, kind of leave those things for the people who are really passionate and can't get enough of that, and find the thing that really ticks for you.
And that's where you're going to take off as a teacher. So let's take sup yoga. There's only a few of us in the valley. We're super passionate about it.
Yeah.
And that gets communicated really well in those classes. There's a lot of elements to deal with when people who are terrified of falling in the water, or there's wind, there's a bear. I don't know, we live in Banff. It could happen. There's rain kind of things. And you just know, like, we know how to deal and incorporate those experiences into a great class.
Yeah.
Whereas someone who is used to being really still in a studio, maybe putting them on water would translate really terribly.
Yeah.
And they have a terrible experience teaching, therefore their students don't enjoy it.
Yeah, definitely. I think that the only way to figure that out too is to try it. Like, there's nothing wrong in like taking that opportunity. I mean, like, yeah, cool, I'll try out teaching yin. Like,
and that's where community classes, I feel, are such an asset, because people know when they're coming into community classes, they're quite often, I'd say 90% are taught by new teachers, unless it's like a fundraising event or something like that.
Yeah.
And you can say, I'm going to try this on. Please give me feedback at the end of class.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Yeah, that's a really good way to like grow as a teacher and kind of figure out what's working and what's not working as well, is to really like ask your students for feedback.
Oh, it's so valuable, especially in the moment feedback. If it's coming after the fact, if it's coming in an email a week later, you don't really know how much has really resonated with them, or if it's things that they've thought about and mustered in their mind, and like when they've sat on it for a really long time, like their experience could be construed.
Yeah.
But like after class, in the moment, how do you feel? What fit? What didn't fit? Give me tools, kind of thing.
Yeah. I
think that's super, super powerful.
Do you feel like when you put out that call for action that people come and give you constructive feedback? Because I found for myself, people are usually like, I always am like, give me feedback. And they're like, great class, awesome class, I enjoyed it. But it's like, that's only a couple people. Most people will just walk out and leave.
Yeah, so there is like, especially people who are simply yoga students and haven't gone through a teacher training, where in my like Baptiste training, feedback is so, so important. We do keep, stop, start.
Yeah.
With everything. Okay. So like keep the tone of your voice. Stop pacing around the room. Start making eye contact with me, kind of thing. Like super simple, super informative. So you're not guessing like, oh yeah, yeah, that was awesome. Being like, okay, I can feel in your voice something wasn't completely awesome, but you're not telling me the entire truth. So I've really liked the keep, stop, start principle with feedback. And I've found that if I ask, especially my friends, my partner, people who have gone through the training to give me feedback, then they'll be honest.
Yeah.
Without thinking they're going to hurt my feelings.
Yeah. Partners are definitely good for that.
Yeah.
I know the most constructive feedback I get is from my boyfriend.
Yeah. Like, why did you do that?
No, actually. He, like, questioned me so hard the first time I taught restorative. He's like, I don't think that was actually, like, good for the body. And I was like, it's in my restorative book. Like, got home and I was like, look at it. This is what I did. And he was like, okay, like, it just felt weird for me. Mm-hmm. And I was like, okay, I need to, like, stop and just hear you because you're actually giving me something that's, like, valuable.
Yeah. And giving feedback, I feel, is super, like, a great skill to have, because even now, like, going out to a restaurant and then you see these online reviews of being like, my waitress was terrible and this food was terrible and I hated it. Don't ever go there. It's a waste of your time and your money. Where it's like, well, did your server come by and ask you how everything was? And you're just like, good. Yeah. Like, that was an opportunity to give feedback in the moment.
Totally, yeah.
And maybe changed your experience had they fixed it.
Yeah.
Then. And especially our generation of having opinions behind a screen, being able to write whatever you want, when you want, with no face value.
Yeah.
Has deterred us from giving in-the-moment feedback, looking at someone in their eyes.
Yeah.
Because that's when you connect, and that's when the feedback becomes really real.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting, like email, text message, online, anonymous person on TripAdvisor. Or even, I mean, I don't even know if there's a source for, like, yoga teachers, but I know for, like, teachers, you can go to, like, ratemyprofessor.com and you can see.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
I don't know if there's, like, a Rate My Yoga teacher.
There probably is. I'm terrified to check that out.
But it's kind of interesting to think about how people can just be like, it could be like, I don't know, Miss Alberta, like 1998. And you're like, you're nobody, right? Like, you're not a face. You don't have to actually go up to a human and say what you're thinking to their face, because it would come out so differently if you actually spoke to them to their face. Yeah. Because you would have compassion for the fact that they're a person.
And I remember hearing in my very first teacher training that getting negative feedback is the same, like, emits the same nervous response as, like, you're walking down a dark alley and suddenly there's a shadow that appears, and it's like your heart rate goes up, you react in whatever way you tend to react in those fight or flight responses. And so it can feel like an attack. Yeah. Yet, like anything, it's a practice. And this is at teacher trainings, we practice getting feedback, we practice asking for feedback, and we practice implementing feedback. Yeah. Because some person's feedback being like, I hated your music. Okay, awesome. Yet there was 10 other people who just gave the feedback, I love your music. And it's like, okay, cool. What is super valuable and I'm going to take and implement versus what is simply someone's opinion? Yeah.
No, totally. And something that's, like, been a big learning for me that so many people have talked about on the podcast is, like, you can never please everyone. So it's like, if you're trying to please everyone, you're going to please no one. Yeah. So it's like, you know, taking feedback is obviously great, but you kind of have to stick to what you believe to be true as well.
Yeah, and the pleasing everyone, again, that comes back into your niche. Because if you find the people that want to sweat and move and groove with you, then that's going to be your niche. Yeah. Whereas if you walk into a room full of people who are restorative yin yogis, you are not going to please them. No matter what you do, no matter who you pretend to be, you're not going to please them.
Yeah, unless you're a restorative teacher. Yes. Then you might please them. Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. Do you have any other, like, tips and tricks that you would recommend for people who are coming into a saturated market?
I definitely feel like putting yourself out there, asking for opportunities is every single opportunity that I've got, I've asked for. Whether it's a studio class, a karma class, a sub opportunity, I've had to ask. Yeah. Quite often, your biggest setbacks end up being your greatest learning experiences. Cool. So even though in the moment you feel like someone's just cut you down, you can always build yourself up, and you're going to build yourself up better than you were before. Yeah. I'm really coming back to what you said, ask why a lot. even before a class, what is my intention? Why am I teaching this class?
Yeah.
Why are these people here? And then at the end of the class, give yourself feedback. If no one's given you feedback, give yourself feedback.
Yeah.
In Baptiste to certify, you have to send in a videotape of yourself teaching. They give you feedback, and then you send another video of yourself implementing feedback. And that cycle continues until they feel like, okay, yeah, you've got it.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. So
that's cool.
Yeah, try that on, or even like tape record yourself.
Yeah. Watch it, even though it's probably going to be painful, like listening to your own voice for the first time.
Oh my God. So awkward.
Worst thing
Yeah.
ever. Remember the first time I watched myself doing yoga, I was like, is that what I look like doing that? Is that actually me? Ooh.
Yeah.
And then it's like a self-love.
Yeah. Yeah, and just, I don't know, everything's always a practice. Mm-hmm. Everything.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's always changing and evolving as well. Mm-hmm. Amazing. Well, thank you. Is there anywhere that people can go to find more about you?
Instagram, I guess.
It's a platform.
Yeah. So I'm Tara Koenig on Instagram. There's going to be lots of yoga and then lots of dragon photos on there. Yeah, I'm going to be starting to fundraise again for Kenya pretty soon. So we'll probably talk about that.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course.
So I hope that everyone enjoyed that episode with Tara Koenig. And if you want to read a little bit more on the show notes, you can check out www.mbomyoga.com. You can also find the sign up for the newsletter there, as well as links for social media. On Facebook and Instagram, it's just /mastering the business of yoga. Signing up for the newsletter is the best way to find out about new episodes, new ebooks that are released, new blog posts, and all of that. So definitely go sign up for that. And as always, thanks so much for listening, and namaste.